Charles Darwin and Other Theorists Before Him by Menly Urban. Beliefs before Darwin. The popular belief before Darwin came along was that organisms were unchanging entities. Aristotle created the scale of nature, which was a great chain of beings. It went from simple organisms to more complex organisms. He believed that the more complex an organism was, the closer it was to godliness. There were 6 theorists before Darwin: Carlos Linnaeus, George Cuvier, James Hutton and Charles Lyell, Thomas Malthus, and Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck. Carlos Linnaeus. He was born in 1707 and died in 1778. He created the binomial system of naming. It went genus, species, such as Homo sapien. George Cuvier was born in 1769 and died in 1832. He created the species strata. It was a system for putting organisms in levels. He believed in catastrophism, that life just ended. He believed that organisms did not change. He believed that one event just ended a species and then another one just came into existence, and that there was absolutely no evolution. James Hutton was born in 1726 and died in 1797. Charles Lyell was born in 1797 and died in 1875. Their beliefs were the principles of Eutharianism. They were mechanics of change that were consistent. They believed that how the world is today always and has been the same. Everything that occurs today has already occurred once in time and is just reoccurring. Thomas Malthus was born in 1766 and died in 1834. He believed in the principles of population growth, that the pressure on populations and individuals limited their resources. The resource limits stopped the growth of populations. He believed that the carrying capacity was as large as a population could get, instead of how it really is today, where populations can go above carrying capacity but then will drastically drop after a certain amount of time. Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck was born in 1744 and died in 1829. He believed that species did change over time. He also believed in the inheritance of acquired traits. The environment of a parent affected the appearance and outcome of a child, such as if you lost a finger during your lifetime, your child will always be missing that finger when they were born. His most popular belief was that giraffes had their necks longer over time from stretching them versus evolution. Charles Darwin was born in 1809 and died in 1882. He was a naturalist. He sailed aboard the HMS Beagle from 1831 to 1836. On board, he was a naturalist, and they explored the southern hemisphere. He observed and collected plants and animals aboard the mission. He examined the environmental adaptation of species and linked these adaptations to the origin of species, such as his Galapagos finches. Darwin studied the Galapagos Island to see the adaptation of the finches and how the sizes of their beaks affected the different species. On the origin of species. In the Darwinian view, the history of life is like a tree with branches representing life's diversity, such as this here with the Galapagos finches and their beak sizes and the different species that formed. Darwin's theory meshed well with the hierarchy of Linnaeus. All living species have evolved from prior forms. He is quoted to be saying, on the origins of species by means of natural selection, on the preservation of favored races for the struggle of life. Darwin defined evolution as a descent with modification. The evolution of species is driven by natural selection. Natural selection, by definition, is the process for which an individual's inherited traits allows it to reproduce at a higher rate or have greater fitness in a given environment relative to other members of its own species. He linked the observations of variation in traits to survival and reproduction. Natural selection versus artificial selection is in nature or breeding, such as breeding for favored traits in dogs. Evolution. The occurrence of the evolutionary change is an undisputable fact. Today, an overwhelming amount of empirical evidence to support the mechanisms proposed by Darwin. Modern-day evolutionary biologists seek to understand the living world in an evolutionary framework. Thanks for watching.